Good day, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel of DevOps.com, and you're here for another DevOps.com webinar. It's the top of the hour, and we are ready to get started. Before we do, let me go, as I usually do, quickly over some housekeeping rules here. Today's webinar is a DevOps.com special. It is based on our editorial calendar and offers a look back at 2017, the year DevOps got real. It is based on an ebook that was co-written by DevOps.com writer Christopher Tozzi and myself, and it will be available to everyone who registered for our webinar. There will be a link for the download probably going out with the thank you notes from today's webinar. I should also mention today's webinar is sponsored by three of our favorite sponsors here at DevOps.com, Azibia Labs, Datical, and Delphix. Okay, before we start looking at 2017, the year DevOps got real, I just want to point out we have set aside time for questions, and we have a great way of doing questions here on our DevOps.com webinars. First, if you look at your go to webinar control panel, you should all see a section marked questions. If you expand the panel, it'll pop open. We are going to ask that you write your questions in real time. Don't wait till the end of the webinar and think you're going to remember the question all of that time, because you probably won't. But if you can ask it in real time, it'll be queued in real time. We may even ask it in real time because we don't necessarily always wait till the end. So please, if you have a question, type it in the question section, and we'll do our best to answer it or have someone from the panel answer it. And even if for some reason we can't, we do have a record of it, and we can write you an answer offline if need be. Secondly, we have a chat function. If you look at the bottom of your control panel, on our DevOps.com webinars, we use chat for technical support. So please, if you have a problem, maybe the slides aren't working for you or something else is going on, feel free to just type it in here. And we do have engineers standing by who will try to help you with whatever the problem is, assuming you could even type into the chat section. So please use chat for tech questions. Questions for questions. We have it loud and clear from India. Thank you very much. Glad to see we're making it halfway around the world. Or is it all the way around the world? Anyway, let us get started with today's webinar. So as I mentioned, today's webinar is 2017, the year DevOps got real. It's a look back and a bit of a gaze ahead at DevOps for 2018. We have a great panel lined up joining me today, a couple of friends. Let's start off with Adam Bowen, whose office comes from the office of the CTO at Delphix. Adam, welcome to DevOps.com.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. Joining Adam and myself is a good friend of mine, Tim Buntel, Vice President of Products at Azibia Labs. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing great, Alan. Hey, thanks for having me, and it's a great topic, and thrilled to have the conversation with everybody today.
Cool. And then certainly last but certainly not least is one of my buddies from down Austin Way, Rob Reeves, co-founder, CTO at Datical. Robert, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
All right, let's play dating game. Oh, no, it's not the dating game. It's webinar. You got to be a certain age to appreciate that. But anyway, so guys, let's take a look at 2017, the year DevOps got real, and what we can glean looking ahead for 2018 here. So first of all, let's start off with this. This is a nice, pretty map. It shows Google Trends searches run from back in 2013 all the way up through the first of the year. And as you can see, though I personally thought DevOps started getting overhyped around 2016. It didn't let up in 2017. The search traffic was, trending way up there, all the way through. And it doesn't, I didn't do a projection out to 2018, but if one were to look at this, you would assume 2018 continues it, this upward trend. Just a quick note, there are a few drops, momentary drops, almost every year. 2014 here, you'll see it right here at the end of 2015, and then again at the end of 2016, and again at the end of 2017. It seems, I don't know if Google stopped searching or because of the holidays, just the entire amount of search traffic goes down, but those correspond actually to the end of the year, around Christmas to New Year's. So that, other than those holidays, it's a pretty steady move up there. Guys, before I move on, I don't think there's any disagreement about that, right?
Yeah,
No, not at all, man. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that there is that drop around the holidays, because in a lot of large companies, they're doing end of the year releases. And then when they get done with it and realize how difficult and hard it was, they go back and say, hey, maybe we should bring some DevOps in. This isn't working out.
It's time for DevOps. Well, that's actually a good segue, Rob, because here's one of the things I found out personally in DevOps in 2017. And that is, a lot of people, I think, were sold the bill of goods, maybe by vendors, though no vendors on our panel today, that DevOps was easy. That all you have to do is kind of, wiggle your nose or wave your wand and poof, you're DevOps. But you know what? The fact is, DevOps isn't easy. And whoever promised you a rose garden, you may wind up with the maze here. As a result of that, though, when you start going to the numerous DevOps conferences that we see out there, you're starting to hear from people that, well, my DevOps project was a failure. DevOps is hard. We didn't get the results we were expecting. And when we look at broad survey data, right? Here's a recent survey we had out of the ebook. 13% have implemented a DevOps sort of end-to-end program. So let's say they've totally adopted DevOps enterprise-wide. 50%, a majority have started to implement and are still expanding their DevOps program. 27%, over a quarter, have not yet started but are planning to do so within the next 12 months. And I think that was 6 to 12 months, actually. And then about 10% are either interested but don't really have plans or are not interested at all. So fully 90% of organizations have plans around DevOps, but only 13%. And by the way, that might be a high watermark. I've seen several other surveys when we look at end-to-end DevOps adoption in the 9 to 12% range have fully implemented DevOps. Now, I know my three panelists, being that you work with vendors, say, hey, that means there's a pony in there somewhere. There's a lot of organizations that still need to implement DevOps all the way through. But why haven't we seen greater implementation, guys? Adam, let's start with you. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm glad seems like mine's here. So I think something goes back to what you said on the last slide that ties in with this, and I agree. Like we did reach, there was a big hype wave with DevOps, right? And I think what's happened though is we did transition from something from where it was just a world of unicorns, right? So the Netflix, the Amazon, everything, the same stories got repeated over and over again, to something that in my last conversation with Gene Kim, we talked about where he talks about DevOps isn't just for unicorns, it's also for the horses, right? And so I think of people like Nike and Walmart and Nationwide, Fidelity, in these companies that have been around for a long time, they're implementing and succeeding now with DevOps. And because of those lessons that they're sharing, where they're kind of traditional companies, other people are actually able to glean from that and implement that too. And I think the biggest challenge, because we are now, since we did have a hype wave, right? where people were trying to be the next Netflix and Amazon, and they're unicorns, they're magical, and they don't really exist, right? But they make for a great story. And I think what happened is just the same thing with cloud. When cloud was the rage back in the day, and then cloud got a big backlash. But here we are kind of with the cloud resurgence 2.0. The biggest difference to me, though, is cloud was about a destination. Right? So I've got to get to the cloud. And there was this fixed destination. Everybody was selling this land of promise, this nirvana. But DevOps itself, it's not a destination. It's a journey. So even at 13%, if it's real, then that means that they're continuously, that they feel like they have from end to end, they've implemented DevOps practices, but it's a constant evolving and living being. If they were to stop tomorrow, to stop progressing and continue to refine that, then they wouldn't be doing DevOps anymore. They'd be sliding backwards. If something has to continuously improve. And I think because of that, because we have traditional cultures where people are so waterfall driven, so milestone driven, and since they don't know how to operate in this continuous improvement environment, that they give up with fatigue. And that is where no tool can provide that. That really does take a different way of leadership, a different way of thinking, and a different way of implementing across the board. But I do believe that now we're past the hype wave, and these smaller companies or more traditional companies are beginning to adopt that more and more. That's been my observation.
Yep, fair enough. And you know what? To be fair, it's not a tool thing. I don't think DevOps fails because the tools aren't good. I think clearly it's a cultural commitment type of thing. But we got an interesting question coming in from the audience who said, look, actually, Adam, they said they were here to learn about Delphix, but they were like, shouldn't you have a slide of what DevOps is? And I wrote back and said, well, that was probably the 2016 look back on DevOps. But, maybe there are people in our audience that when we talk about DevOps isn't easy. In fact, it's hard. What's DevOps, right? How could you decide whether it's easy or hard if you're not sure what it is? And here we are in 2018, still trying to say, hey, well, what is DevOps? Robert, what do you say to people? Like, what can we do to answer that quickly and get them up to speed?
Well, sure. I mean, look, DevOps is not something you can buy. DevOps is a way of getting that software out the door, and it's an algorithm. It's looking at how you release software to your customers today and identifying where the friction points are. Is it updating the database? Is it getting good data for your testing? Is it automating the application release process? All of these are potential areas of improvement for DevOps, and you need to tackle the one that's causing the most friction, solve it, and then find the next one and the next one. Lather, rinse, repeat. That's what DevOps teaches us. It teaches us to identify the hottest point, the point that causes the most friction in your release process, resolve it, and then go to the next one. Pretty soon, you're going to look around in a year, 2 years, 3 years, and say, wow, we've got push button releases. How'd that happen? And it was an iterative approach.
Yep, I agree with you. Hey, Tim, let me ask you a question that occurs to me. Maybe part of the reason why we're not seeing greater end-to-end adoption is that for some people, at least, we still haven't solved the what is DevOps.
Yeah, and I think this is a good point, that we have a lot of terms out here that get mixed up together, right? We say CD, we say CI, we say DevOps, we say, all of these different terms that are talking about this process of how we get better at bringing value to users or customers through software, right? And, when we think about these at ZB Labs, we think of continuous delivery and DevOps together, right? So DevOps is this approach that Rob was talking about. It's this way of breaking down barriers between teams that have to deliver that value, creating cross-functional teams, making sure that everyone's aligned around outcomes, instead of jobs. And CD, for example, is a way to achieve that through some processes that include automation and include some of the kind of things that tools can play a role in helping out with. But in many ways, it's similar to what we all experienced a decade or more ago in the transformation to Agile, right? People were perplexed when you said, what is Agile? And they started stammering about, well, it's about this sort of philosophy and this way of changing thinking about how you build and release software. that's kind of the situation that I see a lot in our customers. So you might have one team that's successful with it, but sometimes folks struggle when they try to scale that to an enterprise.
I think that is really an excellent point, Tim. That when we talk about DevOps, we see it's an individual team, and that's why I think you have such a high, 50% or more have implemented, but it's not organizational wide because it
and
goes
I would say that
built.
Yeah, sorry, and that's what we see with a lot of the organizations that we help, right? So you'll have these early successes, right? Just like you did in the early Agile days. You'll have teams that will say, look, we're going to take this upon ourselves to rethink how we build value through software, and they get really innovative in breaking down some of those silos and coming up with some success. But then when it comes time to roll that out enterprise-wide, that's where a lot of companies struggle. How do you take on some of the real enterprise needs around management and authentication and reporting and compliance for something that was kind of meant to be sort of scrappy and at the team level? And I think that's something that a lot of folks struggle with.
Yeah. So one more question on this slide for my panel, and that is, when we do the 2019 look back at 2018, will that 13% number change dramatically? Will we have more organizations that are sort of DevOps end to end?
Oh, absolutely. Or your number's going to go down because the companies that haven't adopted DevOps are going to go out of business. It's really that simple. And Tim was right on the analog, with Agile. It works. The reason why you're seeing this is because, the adoption of Agile was so quick because it worked. There are still companies that are doing Waterfall, and they're either going to change or they're going to go out of business. Same thing with DevOps. So yes, that number will go up, and will go up, I would argue, exponentially. Just add up the 50 and the 27 and the 9, and there you go. You're
it's 100% or damn near close. But here's something, Robert, you said something, and I'm interested in Adam and Tim's take on it that is, I don't know if Waterfall ever goes away. I don't know if, there may be instances or situations or even specific organizations where Waterfall work is the best tool for the job, or not the best tool, but the best process or methodology or framework, whatever you want to call it, for that particular job, right? I don't know if DevOps ever 100% totally replaces Waterfall. The same way I don't think Agile has, right? I think we've got a lot of people who do Water Scrum Ops.
Alan, I got to tell you, man, I disagree 100%. I was at an Agile conference last year, and I was talking to a person who, she couldn't say it, but she alluded, based on the company name, they made missiles. And I asked her, I was like, what the hell are you doing at an Agile conference? Isn't that a little dangerous? And she said, absolutely not. What Agile afforded them to do is, when they're testing, and their testing isn't like what we do in software. They need a bunch of dirt out in the desert to test their stuff. Due to weather, if a testing date gets pushed out, what they do is they branch the code, and they do another sprint. So they're just not sitting around. I disagree. I think that, in places where we think we need Waterfall, like putting a person on the moon or something, or Mars or whatever, we can absolutely use Agile. And I think it is self-defeating talk to say, well, we're special and we're not going to do Agile. We're not going to do DevOps. You're lying to yourself. It's like, oh, I've got good genes, I don't need to work out. Nah. Yeah, you're yes, you do. Everybody does.
Yeah, well, yes, you're right there on the genes. Adam, Tim, what's your view on that issue?
Yeah, so for me, DevOps, DevOps is a philosophy and a business-driven approach to delivering software, right? So for me, the main goal of DevOps is to break down these barriers that exist, have traditionally existed between teams involved in the development process, to allow those teams to work better to deliver their software frequently and reliably, right? And the frequency and the reliability is really important if you think about the value that we're delivering in software, because every moment that exists from when the business says that a certain functionality is going to be important for your users or your customers, till the time that that's in their hands is waste. So our role in DevOps is to shrink that time and to make sure that that value can be available to your users as quickly as possible and reliably. So frequency and reliability are really important. And if you're looking at Agile versus Waterfall as a way to think about structuring that release process, that's fine. You can have some compatibility there with DevOps as long as the goal continues to be, how do we reduce that time that it takes to get value to our customers? How do we get the teams to break down barriers so that they can work collaboratively towards that? So I think they're not necessarily, it's not a Waterfall or DevOps. I think DevOps is something that is more, for me, at a higher philosophical sort of organizational level. And then there's ways to implement DevOps with tools and practices.
Got it. Excellent. Look, you know what? We could probably talk just about this slide for an hour, but unfortunately we don't have the time. So, but we've kind of hit on this though, and I want to drive it home, and that is, DevOps is iterative. It is about feedback loops, as much as it's about continuous integration and continuous deployment and continuous security, it's about continuous improvement. Right. And so, when I talk to people who say, hey, our DevOps project was a failure, I think it's a failure only if they stop doing it. Right. Even when you don't achieve your goals, perhaps on speed of deployment or frequency of deployment or something like that, there are still lessons to be learned there that you incorporate and continuously improve. And I think that's not a tool thing, that's a cultural thing. And it's tied into blameless postmortems and a whole bunch of other sort of stuff you learn about when you're doing DevOps. But it's lost on people who are, in a quick fix society where we get our news in 10-second sound clips and no one reads past the second paragraph of articles anymore. They tend to want to, just cast it as a failure or give up right away. Adam, what about you?
I mean, that's pretty much, my point earlier, right, is that even with these unicorns, that kind of caused the hype wave. Again, the repeated stories over and over again, Amazon, Netflix, so on. If they were to stop tomorrow, continuously improving, right, then they've given up, like they're not doing DevOps anymore. They might be Agile. Right? And I think there's DevOps shops that have components that are Waterfall. I mean, make no mistake about it, right? Ultimately, there are components that will be Waterfall and will be for the foreseeable future because of technology limitations or because there's only so many hours in a day and there's better projects to actually adopt and get better speed out of, right? So if we had indefinite time and money and all that stuff, then yes, you could Agile all the things if you wanted to, right, and spend enough time to do that. But really you're looking at in DevOps, it's about how do you get product, high quality product to your consumers' hands as quickly as possible so that way you can then get that feedback loop going again. And that's sometimes letting the mainframe be, right? And then working on other things that give you, that are more low-hanging fruit and can give you better productivity or better, consumer experience up front. But ultimately, it is always about pursuing that goal. And whether you're doing that 1 week in your journey or 7 years in that journey, it's always about continuously improving. Otherwise, you're doing something else.
Yep. I don't disagree with that. Robert, do you want to be the contrarian?
I don't know. I mean, should I? Is it, how long has it been since the last time I was contrary?
No,
is there a half-life? No, Adam's right. I can't be contrary. I mean, he's spot on. I mean, look, there are certain places where you are going to get diminishing marginal returns. All right. And that's why it's very important to do the value stream mapping, which is where you look at your entire release process and say, where are we spending the most time? At some point, it shifts from 12 days to 6 to 3 to 2 to 1. You start getting to an hour, you start getting to minutes. Is it worth spending a lot more money and time and effort to get rid of that, get that minute down to seconds? Probably not. And so if that's updating or automating some parts of the infrastructure, just walk away. Or maybe you only make that push once a year. It's just not worth automating that.
Yep. So guys, I'm going to use my moderator's prerogative here to get the last word in on this slide. And I will say this, that progress in DevOps isn't always hockey stick kind of shaped, nor is it necessarily linear, right? And frankly, just like when we look at the Google trending graph of DevOps related searches over the last 4 or 5 years, even though it trends up pretty spectacular, right, on a 45-degree angle, let's call it. Within that 45-degree angle, you see dips and bumps and peaks and valleys. And just like that graph, so will your DevOps progress hopefully be, right? It's not always going to end the way you want it to, but I think it works for there. Okay, let's move on here because times are wasting. So our next topic is 2017 seemed to be the year of DevXOps, right? Everything goes with DevOps, right? DevSecOps is probably the first or second busiest section of our DevOps.com website, right? Everyone's talking about security and DevSecOps, and for a long time they didn't want to call it DevSecOps. They had all other names, but seem to have settled on that. But we're also seeing DevBizOps, right, with the business, DevSalesOps. We see DevDataOps, right, whether it be database or just data. I used to be of the opinion that there was just one DevOps. DevOps is DevOps and encompasses all these things. But I've what's the word? I've evolved on this. Okay, I've evolved to understand that, because there are still a lot of people who A, don't understand what DevOps is, and B, think is just about dev and ops, that, by including data or sec or biz or just XXX, it brings them into the fold. Dev test ops, right? It brings them into the fold. It makes them understand that there's a place in this tent for them and the kinds of things that we do. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but I mean, to me, this is one of the big stories of 2017, that, there was this philosophical kind of debate that went on for years about, no, it's just DevOps, right? You can't call it anything else. And now it's sort of okay to use these other names. I don't think that's very controversial. If no one else, if anyone else feels differently, chime in. Otherwise, I think we're done on this one.
Yeah, it's a big tent, man. Just join the party. Good things happen.
And it's almost unfortunate to me that the word DevOps became the term for this in the first place, right? Because as a portmanteau of those two words, right, development and operations, it kind of does, I think, as you said, Alan, kind of leave people out of the conversation in the first point. So for me, all of these, insert your organization here in the middle, is simply a way to zoom in on that piece in the bigger picture, right? So if we're saying we're about, releasing better software faster, well, let's talk about the role that security plays in that. Let's talk about the role that data plays in that. Let's talk about the role that these other groups play in it. But at the end of the day, we're still talking about breaking down organizational barriers to releasing better software faster.
but I didn't have those domains. So DevOps kind of worked out well for me. But in any event, I think we're there on that one, guys. So let's move along here. So our next question, or our next area that we wanted to jump into on, is the rise of DevOps consultants. So this, I guess I sort of foresaw it coming, but it still kind of blows me away when I look at there's an entire ecosystem now of whether you want to call them DevOps consultants or DevOps coaches or DevOps trainers or DevOps, leader kind of consultants, and they run the gamut from, the IBM Accentures of the world to, who have DevOps consulting as part of their practice. Then there's a second tier of fairly large consulting companies that are really specializing in DevOps, to a third tier of just DevOps, people who have done DevOps at other organizations and are now kind of taking those lessons and offering them to others. And, to onesies and twosies shops, right? Where you get a guy who wrote a book or hangs out a shingle. And you know what? Those guys are making a ton of money too, because it seems that the is an insatiable thirst for DevOps consultants in the market, as well as people who have DevOps in their title, right? DevOps engineers and all of that's a whole other thing. Here's the flip side to that, though. And Tim, this drives home right to Zibia Labs, right? Can you just be a DevOps tool provider, or do you need to wrap DevOps services around your tool?
Yeah. Well, again, let me point back to Agile again, right? So as many organizations were going through that transformation, everybody was an Agile consultant, right? And, Agile training, this sort of thing. And tools can absolutely play a role in that. And how do you use the tools correctly can be something that you benefit from having some professional services and help with that. However, for me, somebody who comes in and says, I can help you achieve DevOps nirvana is just as ridiculous as me as a tool vendor coming in and say, install my product and you will do DevOps, right? It doesn't work that way. So I personally like the title that was used for Agile in the past, an Agile coach, right? So somebody who comes in and helps teams figure out how to be successful with this and how to spread it in their organization from their first successes, right? So how do you change the dialogue from, hey, you should do this, to, hey, this is what DevOps did for us, and try to get other people to embrace that, right? So I think looking to professional services and tools to help organizations spread that and be more successful on their own, great. But if somebody is coming along telling you that, pay me $500 an hour and I will get you DevOps or deliver you DevOps, then clearly they've missed what that definition is.
Yep. Adam, what about Delphix? I mean, Delphix has a sizable business sort of outside of the DevOps mantra, right? How do you guys look at kind of working with quote unquote DevOps consultants?
Look, I think Tim put it great, right? So and I speak about this all the time. At the end of the day, since DevOps is a journey, right, and not a destination, there's nobody that can get you anything, right? What they can do is they can help you. And since that, and I put it this way, I love the phrase of a coach because of the fact of that's all they can do. But at the end of the day, whether it's Accenture or somebody like Contino, who I've done a lot of work with in the past, people that have actually implemented DevOps programs and done that, you can bring them in the coach, but you got to remember, everybody from the CXO all the way down to the people that do the data entry, all those people are the team. And at the end of the day, you can't expect the coach and for him to bring in all these players and then get you, a championship title and then leave and expect that you're going to be this elite ball club next year, to borrow, a basketball reference. Same way in DevOps, you can bring in somebody like Contino and they've got some really great people that can help evolve your company. But for the CEO has to be willing to play the game. He has to be willing to change the way he manages, what he accepts as culture, I'm a firm believer culture is what you mandate, or excuse me, not what you mandate, but it's what you tolerate. So his expectations of employees and of himself has to change, and the way that everybody expects all the way down to the way they do their work and their own personal accountability has to change. And a coach can help you implement those at the right places, but he can't do everything for you. And it doesn't matter if it's Delphix or if it's Puppet or if it's Datical. The thing's the same, because at the end of the day, you can come in and we could do all the changes for you. If we do that when we leave, you've not changed anything. You have some tools that might help you make more productive, but you're still, your processes and culture are still broken, right? So
excellent point. Excellent point. An excellent analogy too with sports like that. But it kind of begs the question, and this is something that I've heard a few times over the years, and I haven't heard a great answer to it. I'll let any one of you to jump in, and that is, can you outsource your DevOps, right? Can you bring in on a temporary basis a team that facilitates DevOps within the organization, knowing that they're there for a 3-month or a 6-month engagement and they're leaving, right? It just doesn't seem organic where it's going to take root, right? I still personally don't think that's a successful model. And I'm sure there are people who disagree with me, but in my mind, that it just doesn't seem as a great way to do it. Thoughts on that, guys?
Look, everybody needs help. All right. If you think you can do it all on your own, you're going to make all the same mistakes that everybody else has made. Why not rely on somebody who has a more experience than you?
But Robert, that's a coach. I'm sorry, because I got to move us along. But Robert, I'm not saying I'm against coaching. I think having a coach is great. I'm talking about supplementing the team with additional team members who are only there temporarily.
As long as you have a plan to take that knowledge that is stuck between their ears and share it with other members of the team, I got no problem with it. If you just have somebody come in like like your construction, hey, build this deck for me, fix my fence. No, that's not going to bring you DevOps. But if you partner on a specific project and you can disseminate that information, those lessons learned, I support that.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move to the next slide, and it's somewhat contiguous, and that is, we certainly saw DevOps training take hold in 2017. Full disclosure, I'm a co-founder of DevOps Institute, so I'm privy to the numbers there, and I will tell you, it was a tremendous year for DevOps training, and worldwide. I mean, the people who are actually taking classes and certifications and so forth. But the bigger umbrella of DevOps training, whether it be DevOps coaching, as to Adam's, analogy, flat out teaching, knowledge transfer, specific skills. We're seeing a lot of the DevOps vendors now starting to come out with specific, DevOps training for their tools. We're seeing DevOps, believe it or not, I've seen DevOps courses being made available in some colleges and universities. It's still largely a self-taught. What we haven't seen is hiring managers that are demanding specific DevOps training. They're still looking more for specific DevOps tools experience. But that's normal. I think it changes. But certainly DevOps training has come a long way from people handing out DevOps certification on a sticky, on a Post-it note for people who attend DevOps days over the years. And that to me really is a major difference from when, for instance, when I first launched DevOps.com in 2014 and through 2015. I'm just curious, are any of the three of you offering training on your specific tools? Tim,
yeah.
Zibia?
Yeah. So we do engage both with education and professional services as part of almost all of our implementations with our customers. So we spend a lot of time when folks are evaluating the product to do a pilot. That involves training as well as actual services, and then we do the same thing post-sale. As part of that, we do have to address, because DevOps is about people and it's not about a product, in many of the organizations that we work with, we do have to address that as well. And I think we do spend time doing that. Again, it tends to be more of what I was addressing earlier, which is in this coaching mode, and helping people figure out how to spread it. Because a lot of our products are also about taking DevOps across the enterprise, we also do spend a lot of time helping people understand how to expand the success that they have with a pilot to the organization as a whole. It's pretty easy to come in and say, hey, we can take this one little team with this one little project and get them successful. But they're going to hit a wall if they're not then left with the tools to spread that horizontally across their organization.
Yep. Adam and Rob, forgive me for my ignorance, but are either Delphix or Datical offering like formalized training on your product yet, with perhaps certifications or anything?
Absolutely.
We both, Datical and Delphix, both have product training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, Robert. I was just going to.
No, for sure.
I work so much with Robert.
Yeah, and we also, in post-training, you get a nice certificate suitable for framing.
Okay. Adam, what about you guys? Delphix offering certification as well, or is it just a little bit less formal?
Yeah, we do have various different enablement programs for our customers. Most of them, they're interested in the journey afterwards after Delphix is really easy to use. And they're more interested in the journey of, okay, now that I have this powerful capability, how do I transform organizations to treat data agilely? Like we've been using all this TACAs, right? How can I do test-driven data development, things like that? So that's where things really get interesting. And of course, that's a deep conversation with our customers, breaking down processes, helping them evolve, and teaching DBAs to be agile, right? Teaching data scientists to work inside of an agile framework. These are all very interesting concepts that we take the journey with our customer.
Perfect. So that brings us, we're moving along, so we'll have time for questions here. But that, that question brings us to our next slide, which is around DevOps tools. So, again, taking the long view, I've been watching the DevOps space since, I guess, 2012, and launched DevOps.com 2014. I'm constantly amazed, not only at the amount of tools that are available now in the DevOps space. I'm amazed at the amount of venture capital money that is invested into these tools. But I'm also amazed with so many of them, and I'll be honest, and I realize I have 3 vendors here. When I first got into DevOps, there were few tools that were truly enterprise class. There was a lot of nothing the matter with open source, but there was a lot of open source kind of scripts and projects and kind of do-it-yourself DIYs, but there weren't, I wouldn't call them enterprise class. And you know what? I think 2017, we saw the rise of enterprise class DevOps tools. Tim Zibia does a great job with your periodic chart of DevOps, right? It's a great way to kind of see the entire DevOps tools market.
That was exactly what I was going to point out. That periodic table. We've been doing that for a number of years, yeah.
And so we could see the amount of tools, but measuring their maturity is hard, obviously. But when we look at enterprises who are using these, I mean, Rob, Adam, both of you are, have enterprises using your tools, in a vast number of your implementations. What are you seeing there?
Well, I think, the thing that really jumps out at me is for large enterprises is a drive to best of breed. Companies that are realizing, large companies that are trying to bring DevOps to the entire organization want the best. And so that's why we see a lot of large enterprises adopting Delphix, Zebia Labs, and Datical. It just works together. And it also scales out to thousands of developers, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of nodes. That is, for the enterprise, that's very important. They want to know that they can roll this out to their entire organization and not have to do, bespoke custom stuff for every single implementation. For the smaller shops, there is absolutely value in open source. And as they grow, they are going to adopt these other enterprise solutions. It's a function of maturity. And it's, I think this is really a reflection of this enterprise move in the DevOps tools market. I think that's a reflection of the maturity of the market, that these large organizations, banks, highly regulated folks, insurance and banks, are adopting DevOps, and they aren't having a problem with it failing. They're seeing success.
Absolutely. And also it talks to the, the open core philosophy of open source, where a lot of these vendors, though they offer open source solutions, they have, premium modules that go on top of it. Just one other quick note on the continued maturation of the DevOps tools market is, with this maturation, of course, you're going to have, if not consolidation, you're going to have, some big companies that their R&D budget is actually their M&A budget. So you're having big companies starting to buy up some of the leaders or some of the higher, maybe ones that are bargains. But we're seeing some consolidation take place, and I wouldn't be surprised if it accelerates in the year ahead. Let us next move, though, over to the DevOps conferences. So this, guys, might be a little against my own self-interest, but I got to be honest with you. There are just too many DevOps conferences. Between all of the DevOps days and all of the user conferences from every single DevOps vendor, and then assorted other DevOps conferences, and then it seems every IT conference has a DevOps section to it, right? Whether it's Cloud Expo with DevOps Expo, or, it just seems like too many DevOps conferences and too little time and travel budgets to go to them. Rob, I know you're on the conference circuit, as am I. That's kind of how I feel about it, though, guys. I would rather see us do less DevOps conferences that are a little bit, certainly something like DevOps Enterprise Summit, Gene's show, is, I think, worthwhile, though even that, needs to evolve and change. But I think we have just too many conferences, and for our audience, it's really hard to pick which ones are the ones to go to.
Well, I'm going to weigh in on this. Actually, from my perspective is, honestly, I think to the first part I disagree with, which is we have too little conferences. But I do agree with the last part, is that too little travel budget and opportunity for people to go. Because one of the main tenets of DevOps is the culture of learning and sharing, and you can't do that inside your own bubble. Right? So one of the biggest challenges of why DevOps is only limited to the unicorns was because not everybody has access to Netflix engineers. Not everybody has access to Amazon engineers. But these conferences are the way for them to actually bring their ideas together. And unfortunately, I love Gene's conference. I attend every one of the DevOps Enterprise Summit, and you'll see me there in London and San Francisco again. And I love that. But what really needs to happen, the DevOps days and these other ones are more for practitioners. And the more of these local we can have where that happens, the practitioners need to be able to share, the executives need to be able to share, but the practitioners have such a fast feedback cycle that the more that they're able to collaborate together across companies, the more it benefits. I see this firsthand in the financial sector. The big banks that are competing each other at a cutthroat level, they come together and they have these focus groups and share underlying technologies of what works for them. And there's no reason that this shouldn't be across all of retail and the others, where they should have these specialized conferences. So actually, I'm a fan of that, but I think the biggest shift that needs to happen in these companies is to understand that the actual wise investment that they can make is in their people to attend these conferences, to be able to the right conferences, to be able to learn and share, and spend $5,000 to send them to a conference across the country if it's the right one, because the value they're going to bring back to your organization in accelerating your release cycle by 1 day or improving quality by 3% is going to be far greater than that $5,000 or $10,000.
And the $5,000. Agreed. But let me give you the flip side. The conference has to be set up to promote that kind of networking and not just a slideshow orgy, right? Too many of these conferences are slideshow orgies.
And I'll tell you, Alan, free market knows best. If they stink, guess what? They're not going to be around next year. And I encourage folks to, definitely go to the DevOps days, local for you, cheap on the budget. But you got to roll with us out to DevOps Enterprise Summit in Vegas this year. And maybe you get the cool invitation to the Datical whiskey tasting.
We'll work. Nice plug, Rob. But you know what?
Hey, Alan, one thing on that I just want to say too is I would encourage people to zoom to the other end of this issue too and look internally and see if there are ways that they can have that sort of sharing and communication that Adam was mentioning inside. I know a lot of great organizations have leveraged, sort of internal DevOps days as a way to spread the success of DevOps throughout their enterprise.
The dojos that Target was doing and stuff like that. They're great.
Exactly.
There's also tremendous variation from DevOps days to DevOps days. But let us move on. That was a great discussion. I think people need to make their own decisions there. The last slide I wanted to really talk about, and then we're going to get into questions and give you guys a chance to talk a little quick. Look, we may say a negative thing here or there about DevOps, but let me just state really clearly, I remain eternally bullish on DevOps, right? I think we are just starting to enter our golden age here where we see innovation and improvement and just great things happening. So whether you go to a DevOps Days conference or you go to a DevOps Enterprise Summit or you go to a Delphix user conference or a Datical or Zibia, guys, meet your community. Go to your local meetup groups. There is so much going on, and I think a lot of really smart people who work at really great companies, some big, some small, are coming up with great ideas around how we can continue to improve this experiment that we call DevOps. So that's kind of my last word on that. And if it's okay with everyone, I'm jumping. Key takeaways. You speak for themselves here. I don't have to read them for you. Let's jump into some slides on our panel members. So first, Datical. Rob, you've got a minute and a half.
Cool. Well, look, one of the challenges that you're going to have with implementing DevOps in your organization is how do you update that database at the same speed that you're updating your applications? And that's the problem we solve. Too often we've seen automatic updates for your application parts, the compiled bits. And, it's incongruous with that automation with the app and then manual effort with the database. And that's what we do. We align database change with application code change. There's a few companies over there that we work with. And I think the commonality that you're going to see with all those customers of Datical is that one, they all want to get faster. They want to improve. They're having a huge amount of pressure in the market and they want to maintain their lead. The second commonality is that they all use Datical. We certainly work with a lot of DevOps tools, especially our friends at Delphix and Zebia Labs. And if you're struggling with the database when it comes to releasing your application, that is something we can absolutely help with.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Tim, you're up.
Yeah, thanks. So, we talked a lot earlier about this notion of, getting past those early departmental successes and really taking DevOps to the enterprise, right? That 15% that was able to do that. And there's that huge other amount of companies who are looking to either get going or really to spread those early successes. That's what Zebia Labs is all about. We're really about DevOps for the enterprise, providing what we've found through our years and years of doing this as the most important pieces. So big thing for us is focusing on outcomes. So we look at DevOps intelligence through a product called XL Impact. We look at release orchestration, integrating with all the other products that are going to make up the tool landscape of your DevOps initiative. and automating the deployment itself. So down at the very most granular level of deployment automation. So if you're interested in figuring out how can you make DevOps not an isolated success, but a real organization-wide, enterprise-wide, high-impact effort, that's where ZB Labs can help out.
Thank you. Okay, Adam, we saved maybe the best for last. Go ahead.
Absolutely the best for last, though my friends at Zebia and Datic will come in a very close second and third. I'll let them find out which ones come in. But anyway, there's nothing continuous about waiting. And if you look at any CI/CD process, by and large, they still wait for data, right? It's still kind of this agile fall scenario where testing can begin and we can do continuous testing as soon as the data gets there, right? So Delphix, we solve that problem, right? So it's whether it's you're waiting for data, you're waiting for copies of data, you're waiting for data to be provisioned, you're waiting for data access to be granted, you're waiting for data to be obfuscated, especially with GDPR, you're waiting for data to be sanitized, audited, scanned, all those things. Delphix, we take care of all that. It doesn't matter if it's 1 terabyte or 85 terabytes, it's available in minutes. And so when you look at the big scope of things of how can you deliver applications all the way to end quickly and rapidly with continuous feedback, data cannot be the bottleneck. There's one of a great CIO recently I spoke to said, data can no longer be an excuse. So at Delphix, we enable the fast, secure delivery of data to any environment, whether it's in the cloud or an offsite development center, or just even in your local data center, but outside of production. We provide that near instantaneously in just minutes, self-service, all integrated. We have a great demo with Datical and Zebia Labs where we show how all this happens, where developers don't have to worry or put in requests for data. They just say, hey, I'm ready for a new environment. They get the data. I'm ready for a test, and it resets the data, all automated through Jenkins or Zebia or wherever you happen to be. So we take care of the data bottleneck, so that way it's no longer an excuse.
Fantastic, Adam. All right, let's jump into a couple of questions then, guys. And thank actually all three of you. Thank you for, first of all, playing nicely together as gentlemen, though I know your companies all work together. But it's great to have a good discussion with some informed folks. All right, first question from Jenny. I'm an IT infrastructure release management analyst in a company that is diving headfirst into DevOps. How can we make release management and change management processes more agile? Ooh, we could go on all day. Tim, you want to, actually, who wants to take first crack?
Well, yeah, I'll say, I would, not to make a product pitch too much here, but, we have a product called XL Release. It's all about release orchestration and managing all of the phases and tasks and, both human and automated parts that comprise this process of delivering software in a DevOps environment. I would say check that out. It's a good place to start.
Okay, next question. Adam, I'm going to ask you because I think you referred to this earlier. What do you think the difference is between an Agile coach and a DevOps coach is?
Yeah, well, I mean, in real short, I think, well, number one, like I said, DevOps is not exclusive to Agile. Right? I know some people use them interchangeably, but it's not exclusive. And there are some synergies between Agile and DevOps. At the end of the day, you can be an Agile coach and not really understand at all. You don't have to understand operations at all. And that includes not just server building, right? But what does it take to actually monitor, to make things highly resilient? This whole concept of site reliability engineer. How do you implement that? How do you coach somebody to be that? Agile doesn't cover that. So it is about continuous delivery, continuous improvement, things that are very familiar to an Agile coach, but it doesn't mean that they have that wide breadth of experience. Remember, Agile coaches are very detailed on, coaching Agile. They're very narrow in kind of that scope of a T. But a DevOps coach is going to be somebody who's very broad and experienced across a range of things that it takes from concept to delivery of software and all the components that take place in that, including infrastructure, operational changes, et cetera. So I think there's a big distinctive difference between those two things.
Excellent. Just a quick question. This was aimed at Robert. Robert, isn't DevOps already being sold as a service?
DevOps as a service? Gosh. I mean, certainly I know of some consulting groups that are working on bringing that out, but the idea of outsourcing this to a group, this is not like a cloud service. This isn't like, hey, run my server for me. This is very much, DevOps is something you need to internalize inside your company. You need to know your internal processes. You need to know how your company gets software out the door today. And I just don't see how that's something that you can farm out. I mean, I see, you could argue Agile as a service with maybe Atlassian tooling, but they're not going to come in and bring Agile into your organization. You adopt those things. So I don't know, maybe DevOps tooling as a service, absolutely. There's things out there. But as certainly DevOps as a service, I'm not sure. I'd love to get a follow-up question on that for more clarification.
All righty. I don't know if we'll have time. Last question. Actually, that was the last question. We're at the top of the hour. We have a few other questions, though. Guys, I'd like to send you in writing. If anyone feels like responding, we can get them out to our attendees. But
for sure.
We're at the top of the hour. Hey, Adam, Tim, Robert, thank you so much for helping me out here today. I think it was a great panel. I wish we had 3 hours to discuss this, but we don't. Zibia, Delphix, Datico for sponsoring. Thank you very much. For everyone who attended today, thank you for sticking around. We will send you a link to the ebook on this topic, A Year in Review, so that you'll have a copy of it. And we hope to see you soon on another DevOps webinar. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.